solitude, my sweetest choice. Oh, solitude, oh, solitude, my sweetest choice. Hello, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. My name is Bill Richardson, and it's my pleasure to be here on behalf of Early Music Vancouver for this episode. I guess that's the correct word, or this iteration of Intimate Conversations, which gives the audience member, the chance to hear a little bit about the upcoming concerts and to meet the artists who are going to be presenting the beautiful music that, in this case, is going to be featured over the course of 3 days at the end of the second week in January, a little mini festival that's happening called Lumen, the Lumen Festival, Lumen. And I've got with me today two of the participants. Joining us from, I think, Boston is the countertenor Reginald Mobley, and from Vancouver is Alexander Weimann. Both gentlemen participating in this 3-day festival. Also presenting is the cellist Eleanor Fry, who is presenting the 3 of the Bach solo cello suites at the Unitarian Church on the last day of the festival. That's January the 14th, Sunday afternoon. That concert, I should say, at this moment, we're speaking on December the 13th, is sold out. And Alex is performing at the West Vancouver United Church on Saturday afternoon. That's December the 13th at 3 p.m. And Reginald, or Reggie, as people often call him, is going to be performing at the Vancouver Playhouse, a concert called The Luminous Hour, on the Friday evening at 7:30. So there you have the breakdown, the layout. You can get all the information about schedules and tickets and so on the website, earlymusicbc.ca. Pardon me, that's earlymusic.bc.ca. I think that's correct. All right, gentlemen, thanks again so much for taking time. I know it's a busy season for both of you. And Reggie, maybe I'll start with you. Your evening as part of the Lumen Festival. And well, in fact, let me just back up momentarily, because we should talk a little bit about the name of the festival and what's intended by these 3 concerts. And Alex, maybe I'll just come to you first of all for that. I'm assuming that Lumen is, obviously it's connected to light, and the lumen is, it's like the calorie, isn't it? It's the unit of measurement for light, as I think I understand. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so. It's the Latin word for light also, and I think that's probably what motivated Susie to go there. One famous line that's often put in music is lumen ad revelationem gentium, so the light to enlighten the people. And I don't even know how it goes on, something biblical, but I think that was the idea. Light where you need it the most, or when you need it the most, right?
Yeah, it's interesting timing actually for that, because every year I've been on the planet for a long time now, and I should be very accustomed to knowing that the days will grow shorter and the days will grow longer. But nonetheless, it always surprises me a little when it happens. And there's a moment of absolute delight and relief. There should be some English word that combines both those ideas in one neat package. And it happens round about that time, about the second or third week of January, when you're just out and you notice that it's changing. You can feel it, you can see it. It's the slant of the light. You notice that the day is just a little bit longer. And there's this, it really is a moment of quiet exultation, I think. Just the demonstration that this at least goes on. So it's a lovely time to be having it. Reggie, what were you, when you heard about this idea, this festival that trades on the idea of light, how did you respond to it?
Pretty positively. I mean, it's the the idea of a festival that focuses on such a thing in such a time of year, especially
Yeah.
living in Boston for the past few years. It's pretty enticing, and it's kind of it's great to focus on an incredible collection of music throughout this throughout the weekend, to give these not just, not just these physical points of light, but actually these gems, these points of light that have kind of dotted and have illuminated the canon of Western music for so long during this festival. And it's so great to always be a part of things like that. I'm always happy to be invited and included.
Well, your presentation on the Friday night, again, at 7:30 at the Vancouver Playhouse, is it's really variety is the byword there. There's a huge range of material that you're playing. The show is called the Luminous Hour. I think it's really going to be about 70 minutes, but you're packed. The Luminous 70 minutes just doesn't work somehow. The Luminous Hour, fabulous, but you are packing a lot in. Tell me about the program, or tell us about the program.
Well, it's a huge collection of things that I think that, in particular, Alex and I both do well together. So particularly Purcell, which we always have fun exploring, and over the years, through the times that he and I have performed this particular English composer together, everyone tends to see the output of what sense of invention that the both of us have individually and together at the same time. And so we're also not just including that, but we're also pressing forward and including basically some bits of jazz, which is an obvious outcropping, not just of the spirit that's within Baroque music, particularly Purcell, but the spirit that lives pretty heavily within myself and Alex as well. And there'll be some new surprises as well.
Yeah. Well, and forgive me, both of you, I neglected to mention, and this is a considerable oversight, that joining you for the Luminous Hour will be Alexander Weimann and the Pacific Baroque Orchestra. So I'm sorry, I ought to mention that right at the beginning. You're performing this new work by somebody who was a friend of Jocelyn's and a colleague, the composer Edward Top. Dutch-born, has been living in Vancouver for the last number of years. I think I'm correct in saying that he's the composition teacher at the Vancouver Academy of Music, and I believe teaches sessionally at UBC as well. So this new work, do you want to talk a little bit about it, because it features some Asian musicians, some Chinese musicians?
It features 4 Chinese musicians and instruments, and it's called Farewell Songs, and based, Reggie, correct me if I'm wrong, based on texts that Mahler also used, I believe, Gustav Mahler, for the Lied von der Erde. It is, one other element in the variety, the big spectrum of elements that we are bringing together for that festival, and that Reggie already summed up beautifully. We have done so many things in the past, and explored so many things a little bit out of the box of the usual Baroque kind of repertoire. So many things that we have collected in the past, and one of them is that new music for period instruments, something that we have been doing for a few years, curated by Rod Sharman 1 year. And Edward Top is one of the composers that we worked with a couple of years ago, I believe, actually right after the pandemic, it led to that commissioned piece. So it's a piece that has never been performed before. I just got the score a couple of weeks ago. It's very exciting, and actually very close to the practice that many Baroque composers would have lived with, to just finish a new piece, new to everybody, that everybody would then explore together. And jazz is another important element in that, of the many wonderful singers I've worked with, Reggie has a series of things that make him unique, and one of them is that incredible being in the moment as a musician, to that extent that whatever happens one time cannot be replicated another time, and that's something that goes really well with Baroque and jazz. And yeah, therefore, even though it's an eclectic and an unusual program, it feels like very natural to me, and not far-fetched, if that makes sense.
It makes beautiful sense. And Alex, the program that you're presenting at West Vancouver United Church on the Saturday afternoon, and again, I'll just to recap, we're talking about the Lumen Festival, which Early Music Vancouver is presenting on January the 12th, 13th, and 14th. And Reggie's concert, the Luminous Hour, about which we've been speaking, on the Friday night. Alex performing at the organ, West Vancouver United Church, 3 p.m. on Saturday afternoon. That will be Saturday, the 13th of January. Now, you were there, I think I'm right about this past summer, right, for the concert you did there. So before we talk about the program, which is improvisatory, talk a little bit about the instrument in that church.
It's one of the most beautiful instruments in town. Not one of the biggest, but one of the not too many that have a mechanical interaction between the actual valve underneath the pipe and the key that's triggered by the player. We call it tracker organ, and it's also it's a copy of a Italian South German Baroque type of organ, and it's very, very beautiful. It's super well suited to play Baroque music on it, but I'm not planning to. It will be fully improvised, and usually when I plan to improvise, I end up with a rather contemporary idiom, largely inspired by jazz, but not really just jazz. And so that will be one of the sources of musical language, but also it will be based on Gregorian chant, in that way that I'm taking the parts of a mass, of a service, Kyrie, Gloria, and so on. Susie Leblanc will sing parts of that Gregorian chant, and it will alternate with verses that will be improvised on the organ. That actually reimagines a practice that was very common in French, in France in particular, so in the French world, 16 and 1700s. And it still is actually there, but yeah, it sort of reimagines that practice, but with a contemporary language. And the whole thing, because it's kind of centered around one line in the part of the Mass that's called Agnus Dei, Lamb of God, and the line is Dona nobis pacem, so give us peace. Will be sort of the cornerstone of the entire improvisation, and or the entire Mass also, and therefore the program is called A Prayer for Peace. There is a little bit of a backstory to that, as in many years ago, the CBC invited me to record for them 3 improvisations, one on organ, one on harpsichord, and one on piano. After it was aired for a few years, I was convinced that it would be a good idea to publish it as a CD. And that program will launch the improvisation that I did for the CBC, I believe something like 5 years ago. So it's yeah, it's an exciting day for me, and I'm already nervous.
Well, I'm going to come back to ask you a bit more about this, but just Reggie, not to leave you out there in Boston, sitting in the cold. What's the pleasure for you in the improvisatory part of your work? I would suppose that for the most part, when you're singing Purcell or whoever the composer, and you're working from a score, it's pretty much set out. But within the I don't want to say confines, but within those parameters, how do you bring in improvisation?
Well, it's kind of it's the most I think it's the most human thing you can do
Hmm.
when you perform. There's so much restriction that's kind of happened since since the Baroque period. I feel as composers began to take a little more control over what their music did and how it sounded and how it was performed. And then there's this hagiology and this deification that happened with musicians and listeners throughout the 19th and 20th century, where it became less about this expression of humanity and culture and more of a paint by numbers, just honoring the spirits of people who, of a few people who've been long gone. But the fact that music exists to create a space for human interaction, I felt as though a lot of that had been lost in classical music, and that was kind of a torch that had been a flame in the Baroque, period, but that was easily picked up in the 20th century by jazz musicians and artists like that. And so to come at a music where I'm not just honoring the notes and rhythms that were laid forth by someone who died 300 years ago, but the fact that I get to perform with them at the same time by including a part of myself, and not just my own skill of improvisation, how I like to move, but the fact that I get to bring this is the thing about improvisation, that it's never planned, it's never thought about. It may be a kind of a mixture of who I spoke to this day, or what I watched on Netflix, or what I had for lunch. I mean, there's so many aspects of life that we get to bring and share in these moments, that we know will never ever happen again. And it creates, I think that's in many ways, that's not just a chance to engage with a composer that existed centuries before me and with the musicians that exist now, but also with the audience that's there, with the people who are there in the crowd. I think it's great because that's the art that happens in music. It's not just static in the way that visual arts exist, as though it's. And that's how I think about a lot of more recent classical music, is that you can put it on the wall, and honestly, in sometimes it's just as impressive on the wall as it is on the stand. But with this music, with musicians like Alex and others, the art is the magic that happens in that moment. A chord that none of us expected to strike at the same time, a trill that happened, and an ornament, an escape tone that happened in that moment, at just a glance at the lutenist, and just sharing in that joy, that we had no idea this was going to happen. And the fact the audience is a part of that too. The way someone in the third row smiles may influence me to sing a phrase a completely different way than I planned. And
Yeah.
it's so alive in that moment. It's so much more than just art. It's humanity, expressed on so many levels at the same time. And so that's kind of what I love about this music, and I love bringing this music, and particularly why I love coming back to Vancouver over and over and over and over.
Well, that's great. Thanks. Really well spoken. I'll just parenthetically, I'll say that somebody who writes about this with a lot of insight, and with, I don't know why I would say surprising. I guess I was a little surprised at her brilliance in writing about this, is Barbara Streisand in her new memoir, where she's very analytical about how she sings and why she sings the way she sings. And many of the ideas, Reggie, that you were talking about just now are similar to the ones that she expresses. I recommend it. It's a wonderful book. It's an amazing life, but it's also a wonderful book about music. Anyway, Alex, so congratulations on the release of the CD. So your concert is part of Lumen on the Saturday afternoon at West Vancouver United Church. It's a CD release event, and it's also this improvisation based on the organ mass with Susie singing, which will be really wonderful to hear. Um, so it's obviously a particular gift you have. I remember the first time I heard you improvise, Reggie was in the room. It was that concert at Christchurch Cathedral. It was the new music for old instruments that Rodney Sharman had curated, I think. If I'm remembering correctly, Bramwell was there as well, Bramwell Tovey. And at the end of the show, you guys sort of traded off. It was like dueling improvs. It was really a wonderful piece of music making. But it is something at which you have a gift. It lives within you more vividly than it does probably within most people. But what I'm wondering about is where does improvisation leave off and composition begin? Because if you were to take what you're going to improvise and annotate it afterwards, notate it afterwards, it would live as a composition. So is the improviser's skill the composer's skill?
Yeah, this is an excellent question, and the lines are very blurry, obviously. Thanks for your kind words. Sometimes I wonder whether my inclination to improvise has more to do with the fact that I seem to be a little fearless when it comes to that. So I'm not sure I'm actually so much about talent. What we do here is improvising. Every human does it all the time. And in music, there's a big wall of fear that I think has more to do with our education system than with us as human beings. For a long time, of course, coming up with music, improvising / composing was an integral part of being a musician. And I think probably with industrialization and division of labor and all of that, things have changed. And from what used to be a composer musician, it shifted to a violinist only, or violinist who can play Paganini and that kind of thing. And if you wanted to be able to do that, you couldn't be a composer at the same time anymore, or at least not the same way. So yeah, it's I think music primarily is a practice, so it doesn't need script, it doesn't need notation, and as the Western music history unfolded, more and more seemed to be in danger of falling into oblivion. So notation developed and all of it, and interestingly, with notation, of course, the window unfolded of composing. What do I mean by that? To improvise a blues, you don't need notation. To even improvise on the Passacaglia, a very popular ground bass, you don't need notation. Perhaps even to improvise something like the Goldberg variations, which Bach probably was capable of doing, I'm not sure you need notation. But to write a piece like Beethoven's Symphony Number 9, you need the script. It's not thinkable otherwise. So in our music history, the Western kind of something like compositions kind of almost took over, and we kind of identified them with music, which is not the case. And it's probably a period that will go by. So composition may be something of the past, even. It still exists. It may still be important. It may always be important. I don't know. But you're right. I think the only difference between a composer, or between composing and improvising, is that in improvisation, you go with the time and it's there and out, and you can't undo it. Whereas a composition you can erase, right? You can delete, you can try again, and you can try as many times as it needs to come up with what you are satisfied with. But the act as such is exactly the same.
Okay, thank you. Great answer. Listen, I presumed on your time and your patience probably long enough. I know, as I mentioned before, we're speaking on December the 13th, and Reggie is on his way to Philadelphia early tomorrow morning for more Messiahs. And Alex, I'm sure you've got a lot slated as well. So I'll say thank you and wish you both very happy holiday time. And just to remind people once again that this festival, Lumen, little festival for the dawning of the new light of the new year, January 12th, 13th, and 14th, a presentation of Early Music Vancouver. And if you go to the website earlymusic.bc.ca, you'll be able to find all the information there about the program, ticket information, and so on. So, gentlemen, that's all for me. Thank you very, very much. Great to talk to you both. Happy trails and take care. And I look forward very much to hearing and seeing you both at the Lumen Festival. All the best.
Thank you.